job interview is one of the most anxiety-provoking situations most people can find themselves in, even when they go to plan. But what happens when you have your worst interview ever? Our guests share their worst interviews ever in the hope that you will take something from their mistakes to have a more successful interview outcome. Some of the stories are horrific and some are just downright embarrassing. Let's join our host, Kevin O'Reilly, the interview skills coach with over 25 years' experience in the fields of coaching and recruitment. Let's welcome our guests to the show.
Welcome. Today's guest is not your typical accountant. In fact, Martin Gilchrist must be the most well-connected, high-energy numbers man in the business. As practice manager at Gilchrist and Co Chartered Accountants, Martin works with a colourful cast of professionals, from tech wizards to legal eagles, medical pros to creative freelancers. Under Martin's leadership, Gilchrist and Co has become known not only for transparent pricing, but also for being a values-driven firm. Oh, and did we mention Martin is one of the most prolific networkers on this island. If there's a brunch, if there's a breakfast or a business meetup within 100 miles, he's either speaking at it or shaking every hand in the room. You're about to hear stories from a man who knows the chaos of business and life inside and out and has the spreadsheets to prove it. So Martin, you're very, very welcome today.
Thank you very much. I'm in trouble. That's quite a build-up for me, whether I can live up to it or not.
Well, Martin, I'm not saying anything that's not true.
Well, thank you. I'm going to take the compliment.
Good. Please do. It is meant as such. It is meant as such. Martin, do me a favour and tell our audience just a little more about yourself, please, before we get into why we're here today.
My name is Martin Gilchrist, and I am the practice manager at Gilchrist and Co Chartered Accountants. Gilchrist and Co is a practice that looks after professional people in independent practice in the legal, medical, tech, and creative sectors. And my role in the practice is everything except accounts and tax. So effectively, there's a principal, Michelle Gilchrist, FCA, who's a senior member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. She does all the hard stuff. I get to drink coffee and eat buns with my friends when we're out networking and bring in work, chase up payments, and make sure that we're compliant with all the rules and regulations that accountants are bound by.
Okay. So you're the out front guy, Michelle's the driving force behind the face.
Yes, someone said once I was the sandwich board man for Gilchrist and Co. I'm not sure that we're being complimentary, but you have to take it where you can get it. So
This is it. I think it's known as the business development manager.
Thank you. That's much nicer.
Isn't it? It's the business development manager. But I know you're so much more than that, Martin. I've known you quite some time now, and I know what kind of guy you are. And I think the very first time I met you was when you walked into a room, and I thought you owned the whole building. Your presence was it just radiated from you, and it was wonderful to see it. And I was asking a friend, who's that guy there? Who is that guy? That looks like a guy I need to have a conversation with, or at least know.
Yeah.
And it was just obviously that you have this presence about you, this aura, and you've been networking for quite some time. You're very, very good at it. And this is potentially something that we're going to discuss today, is about the networking skills that you have picked up over the years and how we can use that and how we can leverage that in an interview process. Now, what I mean by an interview process is the process before the interview. How do you network with individuals you potentially want to work with or for? So that's the vein that we were maybe going to go down today. But I also want to talk about accountancy interviews.
Okay.
Because I can't see them being similar or different than many other interviews. However, we all know that there's nuances between different industries and different sectors and also different organizations in general. So Martin, you have been employed in the past, but before we even get there, tell us about something that's really like so important to you that you achieved over these last 20 years in your business life, Martin.
I think the thing that's most important to me is the network of good people, of good business owners, of good professionals that we have around to practice. People that know, like, and trust us. And most important of all, people that trust us. Because trust isn't something that just pops up out of the ground. I can't go and buy trust. I can't go and tell you to trust me. Trust is something that comes from doing the right thing over and over and over, being consistent, being professional, being diligent, being trustworthy,
Mm.
being that person that people can trust. And in order to develop a good, strong, supportive, inspiring, motivating, engaging, useful network that actually gets stuff done, um, you have to you have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. You have to keep turning up. You have to be helpful. You have to be useful. You have to be something that people look at and say, yes, I want to be connected to that person. I believe them to be credible. I believe them to be a decent person. And having a network is all about that. So, they don't teach it at university or school. Um, it's not, some people just make it, I'm not saying that I'm that person, but some people maybe have great networks and make it look easy that it just happened. It doesn't just happen. It takes something. And for us to have that network around Gilchrist and Co. of good people, such as yourself, people that will reach out to us and that we can reach out to for help or whatever we need and support, education, information, knowledge, all that good stuff.
What I'll say, Martin, it takes a village.
It takes a village to raise a child.
It does.
And
And in this case, the child is a business.
yeah, exactly. A business is very much like a child. It has to be, it starts off small,
Hmm.
doesn't know where it is, can't survive by itself, and over time it grows into a strong, thriving, useful member of society or your community. Businesses are a crucial part of any community, any society, any country, and you're absolutely right. They have to be supported until they can stand on their own 2 feet. So good point.
Yeah, and I have noticed that I've been a business owner myself and supporting other business owners and entrepreneurs through their startup journey and growth journey. I tend to find that just like that child, just like that young child just born, they're the most vulnerable at that stage. And being a parent of 4 children myself, I do understand that at every stage there are different challenges. It's not that it gets easier as they get older, it's just a different challenge arises as they get older. And my children at this moment in time are all teenagers, all 4 of them. And I would be happier if they were much younger. And I left, when you put them down where you left them and they were there when you came back, whereas this, you don't know where some of them are at this stage until they let you know, or it's a different challenge. It's a different set of challenges, Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. We only have one boy, James.
Hmm.
And as a proud father, obviously, we're all proud of our children. But James graduated. James did a higher level apprenticeship with us in the practice, which means he got to go to university and do his degree. But rather than doing it full time with all the others, it's the same degree as the full time students do. But he did it part time over 4.5 years instead of 3 years. And he graduated last year, and he's joining us now in the practice as a trainee chartered accountant. He's already a qualified accounting technician. He did that while he was doing his A levels in the earliest year of his degree. So he owns he has a practicing certificate. He can practice in his own right. But yeah, we're very proud of them as well, and it's great. One of the great things about owning your own business, nepotism. I shouldn't really say that, but it's true. Been able to have you, and we always said to James, he said from about the age of 7, 8, like he was talking about, he wants to be an accountant, he wants to work in the practice, he wants to work with us. He obviously likes us,
Mm.
which is a nice thing. But we are so proud to have him with us in the practice now. And you were saying about children, funny you were saying about them going away and you don't know where they are until they tell you. Like James is 24, he'll be 25 this year. So he's a fully grown man now. He's an adult in his
Mm.
own right and he can come and go where he pleases. But he went off to England there for 6 months, after his degree, just to, he'd worked really hard for a long time. He wanted to do something a little bit different and experience different things. And even at 24, 25, it's very hard to let your kids go. You know,
Mm.
it's Michelle's heart was broken. Now he's coming home. He's actually coming home this weekend. We're going to be delighted to have him back again, back in the fold. But yeah, there's something special with kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it's as I've always told my children, you will always be my children. You may be adults, but you'll always be my children.
Hmm. And it works the other way as well. Your mum and dad are always your mum and dad.
They are.
They can always tell you off.
And Martin, they do, to be completely honest, they absolutely do. But you getting to where you are today in business and in life, obviously it's never a straight road. So there must be something within this journey of yours and getting to where you are now that you thought, how did that happen?
Yeah,
What did I do to deserve this?
yeah,
Do you want to share a little bit, Martin?
yeah, absolutely. I if you'd met me at 16, I was on a road to no town. I had left home, so I was living in digs in Belfast. Back then, I had a lot of very healthy hobbies like smoking and drinking and partying, and basically, there would be me go. I would have gone without food maybe 3 days a week, so that I could go to the pub with my mates at the at the weekend. All my possessions fitted into one black bag. I had very little education. You know, I had basic GCSEs and enough GCSEs to get me into an A level course if I so required. But I wasn't on an A level course. I'd left school before I'd finished A levels, and I was working two jobs literally to cover the rent because there was no minimum wage back then. You know, I
Mm.
was my first job. Well, I worked on a building site as a groundsman first, so the people that dig trenches around houses to put in the drain pipes and put down the flagging stones. It's hard work, I can tell you, and you're working with some characters in that environment. But after that, I worked as a trainee bookkeeper with a practice just outside Saintfield, and I was on the YTP scheme or some scheme like that.
I remember the YTP, yes.
Yeah, it was £30 a week was the
Hmm.
contribution that was made. £30 a week. You know, that didn't
Hmm.
even cover my rent. And I was living in digs in a rough enough part of Belfast. You know, at that time people were getting shot in streets not too far away from where I was. It was a frightening time. And you would have thought this guy's going nowhere. That's what you would have thought. But then I was lucky. I bumped into Michelle, my wife, now of 27 years almost, or whatever it is. And for whatever reason, she seen something in me and picked me up, put me on my feet, put me through a few qualifications. And when I proved myself, she went into business with me. And here we are, nearly 20 years later, in you know, a really good place.
Martin, that's a lovely story.
It is.
And I know Michelle, and she's very unassuming.
That's true. She is um, a very kind person.
Hmm.
Um, there's two things I love, which are the opposite side of, well, it's not love. I love hate thing. I hate selfishness. And when I see selfishness in any, people jumping queues or people not paying their staff appropriately or people not working for the salary that they're getting paid or you can see selfishness in
Hmm.
everything. I hate selfishness. But I love to see generosity. When I see people going above and beyond, putting themselves out there, doing stuff without expecting anything in return, being kind to people, treating people with decency and respect, caring about people. That's all generosity. Michelle is one of the most generous people I know, and it's I don't sound all corny and stupid about this, but genuinely, look, when I look at my background, look at this Gilchrist and Co chartered accountants. None of this would have happened for me. The life I have now, being able to do all the networking that we do, the comfort that we have, all derives from the fact that Michelle is such a decent, generous, hardworking, caring, nice person. And also really nice to live with and work with and all that type of stuff as well. So yeah, I was lucky. Fell on my feet the day I bumped into her.
Absolutely. It sounds very much like it. And I can say the same about my own wife.
Mm-hmm.
I can say exactly the same about my own wife. But just picking up on a couple of the things that you just said there with regards to that selfishness, to me it actually sounds like fairness. As in, you mentioned about the queue jumpers, and that's unfair when you've been standing in a queue for a while and someone jumps the queue. Seems unfair.
Yep, that's true.
And people just taking more than what they're entitled to, or not working for the not working and getting paid a salary. I think that's unfair as well.
Mhm.
But you're right, the kindness makes a huge difference. And I suppose that brings us nicely into what I believe and what you believe to be certain values that you would love to see in someone coming into your business. So let's say, for example, someone was coming in to be an accountant within your world.
Mhm.
You are sitting at the table, and I would make an assumption that you would like to understand if they are selfish, if they are kind, as part of your value system within Gilchrist and Co. But what else are you looking for?
Um, there has to be, unfortunately, I would love to say that the first thing is the right attitude. I would love to be able to say because that is vital, having the right attitude. But with a chartered accountancy practice, I suppose any accountancy, but like with a chartered accountancy practice, you have to have a base level of education, and that base level actually has to be quite high because the concepts, the policies, the procedures, the laws, the legislation, the statutes, all that type of stuff that you're having to deal with, and all the different threads that you're pulling together in order to be able to provide a professional service, you have to have your head screwed on, and it takes literally, when I look at James now, he started training when he was 16. So he finished his GCSEs, and his GCSEs enabled him to get into the AAT course, the Association of Accounting Technicians. The AAT course was above A level standard. It was a hard course, and he had to work at that while working at his A levels at the same time. And then he went on to do a degree, and you need two A's and a B to get into an accountancy degree. So it's a hard old road to get into the
Mm.
degree in the first place. And then the degree's tough, until you actually sit and go through the exams and at the level that they have to achieve at in order to qualify with an accountancy degree. It is actually a very hard degree. And then after you've done that, it's the shock of the chartered exams because it's not a step up. It's two or three floors overnight while you're working full time. So students studying for their chartered accounting exams are working full time in practice and they're studying in the evenings. Now, they get usually about 8 weeks off. If you have a training contract with a chartered accountancy practice, you'll get 8 weeks off before the exam to study.
Okay.
But my experience of that is the good candidates are studying 12 hours a day for the full 8 weeks before the exams. That's
Mhm.
that's the level. And when Michelle was doing her chartered exams, they had to go in on a Friday evening from like 6 o'clock through to about 9:30 and all day Saturday. Imagine doing that in your 20s for
Yeah,
3 years.
yeah.
That takes a lot of commitment. That's the caliber of people that's where you have to be before you
Okay.
even get to sit in the chair to get the interview. That's
So
what
that's
it means.
that's the hard skills.
Yeah, that's a hard
So
skills.
that'll get you to the interview. So
Yes.
once they're there, Martin, in the interview room, and they've ticked the boxes of your hard skills.
Mhm.
And I know you mentioned attitude there, but what are you looking for? What will make a candidate stand out to you more so than for the right reasons,
Mhm.
more
Um,
so than not?
well, the stuff that won't be evident, the other stuff that we'll look at before they get to the interview, okay, what marks out a candidate before we actually get to speak to them, is what have they done that they didn't have to do? Because you can be single-minded, you can be utterly focused and say, I'm going to be a chartered accountant, a doctor, a solicitor, a barrister, an engineer, and that's all you do. We don't want people that are single-minded. We want people that are open-minded. So we'll look for things like can you play a musical instrument? Were you on the football team? Have you been a champion of anything? Have you been a badminton champion or a tennis champion or a table tennis champion or a chess champion or something else that shows that you've got interests outside of work? Because if all you can do or all you're focused on is a job, it becomes all consuming. What is your release? How do you break the cycle of thoughts, of pressure, of anxiety, all that stuff that can be built up in a high pressure environment if there's not something else that you can get away to, that you can escape to. So we look for those other things. I'm a real believer in the ability to play a musical instrument. Playing a musical instrument, you don't just wake up someday and be able to play a guitar or a violin or a whatever your instrument is, a drum. So I don't care what the instrument is. Can you play it to a decent level? Because that means application and skill and mental agility and mental ability and all that good stuff. So if you can play a musical instrument, that's going to impress the socks for me. But anything else is the thing we look for. So you've done that. You've got the hardcore skills. You've got that additional thing that you've shown that you've gone out and you've been able to do to the world. You're now sitting in front of us in the room. Are you self-aware? You're sitting across from somebody that can give you a job and who wants to work with you. But at the same time, they're going to be your boss. They're going to be teaching you stuff. They're going to be giving you an opportunity to learn stuff. They're going to give you an opportunity in a chartered accountancy practice. If you want to work in an accountancy practice, you're going to learn stuff that's going to allow you to go out into the world and set up your own practice. You know, if you take the opportunity. Are you self-aware enough to appreciate that? And do you show it during the interview?
Well, I was going to ask that, Martin. What does that look like? So, you know, we can bat this that around that word around self-aware, but what is it you want to see? So when someone walks in, what is it you want to see? But also, what do you not want to see?
Okay. What I want to see, I suppose, is simple good manners. I want them to reflect the good manners that I'll be showing to them. I will be treating any candidate with the courtesy they deserve because they've taken the time out to complete the application form, to come in and see me, to prepare for the interview, hopefully, and to, take the opportunity. Right. That's good manners in my view. So
Hmm.
I will reciprocate that. But I want them to see, first of all, I want them to dress like they mean it. I want them to turn up in professional attire, cleanly shaved, hair brushed, you know, teeth clean, smelling good. You know, I want them to turn up like they mean it. Okay. And
Is
then,
that sorry, Martin, to cut across you there, but do you think maybe there's something there with regards to you're thinking those people are going to be representing me? Those people are an extension of me, of Martin Gilchrist and Co. Chartered Accountants, and and I and for those in the audience here that can't see Martin, Martin is always cleanly shaven, well groomed. I don't want to say he smells well, but he does. And it's just he takes pride in his appearance because it is part of who he is. And I would make this assumption based on what you had just said that you also want that other person to take that pride in their appearance as well. But let me just throw something back at you. What you mentioned cleanly shaven. What about a beard? I'm a beard wearer myself. What about a beard?
yeah, it's not the issue of a beard. It's that the beard isn't food sticking out of it and we birds nesting on it
Ah,
and all that
okay.
type of stuff. So when you look at your beard, you're clearly well maintained.
Okay.
It's looked after and well presented. you
It's
know,
it's groomed. It's
yeah, it's
groomed.
groomed. It's not something that people are going to put them off their breakfast, sort of thing.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
I see people come in that look like they've slept in a tent for 3 weeks
Right.
before they've arrived. And each their own. That's I'm not criticizing anybody for how they decide to present themselves, if the tattoos or if they wear a hat and all the rest. It's just it wouldn't fit into the environment that we're trying to create here at Gilchrist and Co.
Hmm.
Every business has to have its, as you talked about earlier on, its own values.
Yep.
And if someone came in and it's not that there's a fault with them or that we're in any way criticize them or that people don't have their own choices, would they feel comfortable within the small practice environment that we have? Because essentially this is a small practice. Everybody has to work hand in, what is it, hand in cheek? That's not right.
Hand in hand.
Hand in hand, hand in glove, whatever that is, hand in hand, with each other, all day, every day.
Yep.
You really have to feel that you're part of that, and if you're too different, it'll be very difficult for you and for us.
So
To
so when you're sitting there potentially as uh, someone sitting on the panel, you're asking questions that you need answers to, obviously, but you're also picking up on those nonverbal signals and communications that you're looking at someone going internally, you're going, could I work with this person for 40 hours a week? Could
Mhm.
this person work on behalf of me with my clients for 40 hours a week?
Yeah.
Is this person going to give me more hassle, or are they going to start solving problems or creating solutions to the current challenges that we have?
Yeah.
Because I know that's what I would have done, and I probably still do actually when I sit on panels. Is that those are probably the four questions that go through my head regularly, regardless of the answers to the actual questions. To me, an interview, unfortunately and unfairly for a lot of people, it's a memory game. However, the attitude, and I want to come back to what you said about that attitude, because what in my opinion you're describing is an attitude. All of these different little pieces pulling together to create one attitude. It takes a certain attitude to show up well groomed and to have taken the time to be well groomed. It takes a certain type of attitude to play an instrument, to dedicate the hard work, the consistency, and the time to do that. So again, there's an attitude that you probably see in yourself that you're projecting and would like to see on others, because people like themselves, and that's what people are looking for. Now, whenever we're sometimes that can be like amazing, but on other times that can hold companies back, because a lot of diversity or some diversity within an organization is good, but you've also standards. And that's clear, Martin. I've known you for quite some time. If the listeners or the audience can see you now, they know you have standards, and that's a good thing to have. In my opinion, that's a great thing to have, especially as a business owner, but as a human being, it's great. And I think you do so much more than I believe you you give yourself credit for. Because when you're sitting on those panels, you're not just thinking about you, you're thinking about your clients, you're thinking about your business, you're thinking about your wife, you're thinking about your son, you're thinking about all of these different opportunities and different people before you even make a decision. So I get that there are certain criteria that needs to be met. And I agree with that completely, because you have to create that standard. And especially for a chartered accountant, as you quite rightly said, there has to be a level of education, a minimum level, which is very high in the first instance. But what would give us three red flags, Martin, that would completely put you off someone when they walked in that door? So they've met that level of education. If you do telephone interviews at the start, they've had that conversation. They seem great. Their CV or application ticks all the boxes that you're after, and they walk in the door. What are the
Okay.
three non-negotiable things?
Um, so yes, we're looking for people that have ambition and the drive to take themselves further on their career, but they're applying for a particular role. And what we don't want to see is someone looking beyond the role that they're actually applying for in that instance, in the instance of the interview. So what I mean by that is you and me meet and we're having a conversation in a room, we're having a great conversation, and I see someone else more important than you. Now, I would never do this, but imagine this, more important than you walk in. And while I'm talking to you, I'm looking over your shoulder and looking at that other person going, yeah, I'm finished with this conversation now. How do I get on to this next thing as soon as possible? And sometimes that comes evident in the interview. Somebody's going, well, I need a job. This job will do, but really what I want to do is something else. And therefore, how much credence, how much application, how much focus, commitment will they give to the role that we're actually offering them? That's not to say
Mm,
that we don't want them to be ambitious and to move on from the role, but you need to take the role that you're interviewing for and show interest in that, first of all.
mm,
Um, the second thing is not having taken the time once you've been given the opportunity to be given the interview. If you, it's one thing to send in an application form or complete an application form, and not to have done detailed research on the firm that you're going for. Which, yeah, I can understand it. But if you're filling in lots of application forms, maybe that's excusable because you need to get the applications out there. I don't know, but once you've got the interview, you need to know everything about that firm. Because you can go onto LinkedIn, you go onto Facebook, and you go onto Twitter, and you go onto the website, and you go onto the company's house registry. there's so many sources of information now that you can go and learn about the firm in which you're going to have do they have a podcast? Do they involve themselves in community activities? Do they host networking events? Do they host training sessions? Who are the staff within the practice? Who are the management? Who are the, find out everything that you can about that practice and impress with that. Tell them why you're going to be a valuable contribution. If you can't do that, you haven't done the homework that takes you past the fact that you're qualified for the position.
Mm.
That's what I would expect now, because that now, not every candidate might do that. But if you are a candidate and you have done that, you're way up
Mm-hmm.
the list
Mm.
right away.
I,
And
I,
then,
I, there was a lovely quote I heard the other day, and it made a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense at this moment from what you're saying. What makes you stand out in your interview is what you do before your interview.
absolutely, it's the homework you've done before you turn up. And then the final thing is, and I was talking about this of the three things you asked me to provide the
Mm-hmm.
other things, and I touched this earlier, but I didn't really get a chance to expound it. Is that sense of self-awareness? Are you aware of your position in relation to the position that there are people sitting in front of you? So, what should your demeanor be? Yes, you have to be confident, but at the same time, you have to be able to take on in an appropriate way the feedback that you're being given.
Mm.
You have to be able to understand the questions in the context in which they've been asked. You have to be able to read the room. Do you get a sense of what you're saying is making the right impression or not? And are you able to change direction? Because you might not be able to answer every question. You might not have an appropriate answer for every question that the interviewer has to ask. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with what's your reaction? How honest are you by answering that question? Do you try to divert or move away from that, or how cover something up? Or do you just take it head on and say, this is the situation, this is what I know, this is what I
Mm.
don't know, and this is what I'm going to do about it?
Well, it sounds a lot like emotional intelligence and integrity is what you're explaining,
That's exactly the words.
isn't it? And this seemed to be there's a vein of thought with yourself, Martin, running through this conversation. Is that you're a highly integral man, and that's what you want to see in candidates coming to you or going into your line of work, because you are managing other people's money,
Yeah,
and you're placed in a place of trust.
yeah, absolutely. And a very simple evidence of that is that anybody watching this, or anybody that's ever spoken to me in the whole history, 20 odd years of Gilchrist and Co Chartered Accountants, and even before that when I was working for other practices and stuff, they'll never hear me talk about another client. You'll never hear another client's name mentioned or identified or their issues raised or anything at all. Because there's a whole lot of other stuff that's involved in the integrity and the professional efficacy of being a professional of any type. But that's a very simple test. Have you ever heard anybody from Gilchrist and Co. ever discuss a client's affairs or even mention the name of a client? Now,
No.
sometimes clients will say, "Oh yes, we work with Gilchrist and Co." But
Hmm.
even if a client came to me today and said, "Martin, I love what you're doing, and I would be more than happy for you to tell the world about Gilchrist and Co. and the great job." And there's some of our clients, not all our clients are great clients, but there's some of them that are doing really incredible things. Some of them are public figures, and it would really add credibility to the practice if we could go out into the world, or if we did go out in the world and tell everybody who we work with. But imagine you're a client of mine and you said, yeah, Martin, you can tell anybody that we're working for. And then I went along to Sally or Paul or Jim and I said, oh, yeah, I was working with the interview skills coach. He's very, very impressive business. And this is what he was doing. And then Sally goes back to you and says, yeah, I was talking to Martin Gilchrist and he told me,
Hmm.
whatever. All of a sudden you're going, hold on a second, what's he telling you? Even if I'd never told you anything of any substance. So that is just one small bit of what it is to maintain that client relationship, credibility, confidence, Confidence and trust is a very important thing. So yes, I need it for me, but we also need it for anybody that's going out there and representing us. So, it's a high bar. I appreciate that, but it's worth setting, because it maintains the practice credibility, and it's reasonably expected by our clients. Our clients have a reasonable um, they can expect us to maintain that very high standard on their behalf.
Mm. My mother always told me, Martin, that if someone will do it to you, or if someone will do it to you, they'll do it against you. And what she meant by that is if someone is mm, telling tales to you about someone else, they will tell your tales to someone else.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's how I can identify people. And I have actually had to push people to the side and say we are no longer colleagues, friends, partners. We don't do that because I don't like it. Obviously, it's one of those beliefs that I have from growing up, but it has served me very, very well. It's one of those things that I actually hold really dear as one of my values is that whenever you and I talk, the rest of the world doesn't, and they don't know what we discussed, and that's
Mhm.
it. And I have to be like that with my one-to-one clients. They are people who are really struggling with one thing or another, and a lot of the time it's a struggling with self-belief and confidence and communication. And to share that with me, in fact, a complete stranger, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to do that. And I tend
Mhm.
to find that once we get in a comfortable place, and a lot of my business is word of mouth, so people recommend me to other people because of that confidentiality, because of that integrity, which is my main value of living is integrity. I
Mhm.
do what I say and I say what I do. It's as simple as that, Martin. If I can't do something, I tell you I can't. If I can do something, I tell you I can. And I always like to see that in candidates coming through whenever I was hiring my own staff. And then when I was on panels for other companies as I do now, I want to see the integrity because I'm sitting thinking, could I work with that person for 40 hours a week? And are they going to cause me more hassle than they're going to solve me? And I'm pretty good at this moment and picking up on that. I've been around the block up a few times. I've done a lot of research and a lot of studying into non-verbal communication, as well as verbal communication, what we say and how we say it. You can pick it up very quickly if the radar is switched on. You can, Martin. Anybody can pick it up, and how most people pick it up, they actually pick it up subconsciously. Do you know when you ever get that feeling in your stomach and you go, "There's something about that person. I'm just not sure what it is, but I
Mhm.
don't, I don't like them, or I don't trust them, or there's just something about weird."
Mhm.
That's because you have seen something like this before in your past. You don't know how to articulate it as a language, but you know there's something not right,
Mhm.
and that's what that gut feeling is. Now, I'm not saying that your gut feeling is always correct because your gut feeling is based on past behaviors and past experiences. And if you have come up in a really bad environment in the past, those will be your experiences that you're now judging the rest of the world on. So it's sometimes best if you can even question, why do I feel like that? What is that telling me? And where has that come from? But Martin, we've reached the stage now in this interview. By the way, this has been fantastic. This is time is just getting away from me. But we've reached the stage now that we're going to change a little bit of pace,
Okay.
and we're going to go to our quick fire round. And for all
Oh.
our listeners, this quick fire round is very simple. It's a list of questions that I will ask Martin. Martin will answer with yes, no, or pass. There will be no
Mhm.
context given. There will be no reasoning. But the reason I ask these questions is very simple. It's because on a weekly basis, I am asked these questions by my clients.
Okay.
And it is always great to hear somebody else's perspective because it's always different. I don't think I've ever had two guests on the show who have said exactly the same things.
Right.
Okay, Martin, so you ready?
I'm ready.
Good. Is it acceptable to wear pajama bottoms to a Zoom interview?
Yes.
Is it okay to bribe the interviewer?
No.
Is it wise to ask the interviewer for a selfie together at the end?
Yes.
Should a candidate smile during the interview?
Yes.
Should you answer the first question with a dramatic pause?
No.
Should women wear high heels in an interview?
Should. Should. Ah, don't know how to answer that.
Yes, yes, no, or pass.
Pass.
Is it acceptable to ask the interviewer how much they make?
No.
Should you high five the interviewer at the end?
No.
Should a candidate swear during the interview?
No.
And is it acceptable to bring your mum to the interview for moral support?
No.
How was that for you, Martin?
Stressful.
Stressful. Okay. All right. Okay. Any of those questions that you think, oh, Kevin, what do you mean? Can I get more context to that? Or,
Yeah, the high heels thing. I,
hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, I just don't know. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not.
It's a question that normally splits a room. And when I asked this question, I asked this question at a lot of workshops because even for those who wear high heels and those that don't, it splits the room equally, almost equally every time. Some people are for it, some people are against it. Some people feel comfortable in them, some people are completely against them because of what they originally stood for. So some people are comfortable, some are not. But I still get asked every week, should I wear high heels or should I not? Usually my answer to the question is do your research, see what is the standard that is expected of dress within that organization, and dress to impress at the interview. If you get in, you can then have that conversation. If it is, yes, you have to wear, or that's expected. And there is those unconscious biases that happen. And
Yeah,
it's not just for women. It's, men as well. Should men wear a suit to an interview? Well, does it depend on the interview? Does it depend on the industry? Does it depend on the level they're going in at? Yes, of course.
yeah. I think it's a funny one, like the subject of high heel shoes, because I suppose I would be. I feel awkward just even because I don't think it's my place to comment on whether high heel shoes should be worn or not. It's appropriate shoes would be,
Hmm.
business shoes without them in the high heel shoes. But is it any more or any less appropriate talking about high heel shoes than asking? Because that's a question for, generally speaking, a lady. You
Hmm.
know, it's you're not going to, generally speaking, put that question or have that question raised about a man, are you going to wear high heel shoes or not? So it's a female biased question. But then the flip side of that is it inappropriate to have a conversation about whether a man should wear a tie? Because it's sort of similar. Ties aren't always expected. Now, in the past, you had to wear a tie. That was it. That was the rule. Actually, people would have been dismissed for not wearing a tie to the office in a professional practice. But is there something different about saying to a man or raising a question, should tie or no tie? And it does seem different. I'm just wondering why that is. Why does asking about high heel shoes, which is just an item of clothing, feel different about asking about a tie?
Well, I suppose it's different because you're not female,
That's what it could be.
and that you have an opinion. We all have an opinion. However, that opinion may come across in a wrong way, whether it be rightly or wrongly,
Hmm.
because that's all it is an opinion. And the way I always answer that question is do your research.
Hmm.
Look at the industry, what is expected of that industry. Because let's be honest, if we were working in a top three accountancy, worldwide accountancy, there is a level of expectation that you're not turning up in a tracksuit.
Hmm.
I think that's a pretty simple assumption to make that you wouldn't be turning up in a tracksuit.
If you were to pick so something happened recently. It was an international incident that was all over the news about the appropriateness of dress. Can you tell me what that was?
Hmm.
Everybody's aware of it.
Martin, I'll tell you a little thing about me. I don't watch the news, I don't listen to the news, and socials I use for business only.
Zelensky visited Trump in the White House,
Okay.
and he wears combat attire all the time. So it's
Okay.
and basically the idea of that is he's representing the fact that his country is at war. So he is the leader of a country at war, and he always dresses in this attire. And he addresses to it when he's going to the European Union, when he's going to Canada, when he's going to America.
Mm.
He doesn't mean it as an insult, but when he arrived to have that conversation with Trump, every single man in the room was wearing a shirt, a tie, and a jacket, except for him. And when the conversation went AWOL, when it went askew, one of the things they used to hammer him was, "You haven't even. Do you even have a suit?" That was the question that was asked of him. So
Hmm.
yeah, these things can be important.
Well, they're important to someone. And
Yeah.
that's again back to this, do the research, work out what it is that's important to that someone.
Mm,
And if you have to play that game, you have to play that game
mm.
because you're looking to join the game. So you maybe just have to play the game sometimes.
Or maybe it helps you decide that it's just not the right team for you. You know, if you go in
Correct.
and the environment doesn't fit the way you feel comfortable, there's more than one fish in the sea.
Mhm.
You don't have to work with the person you've got every firm you go and do an interview for. It's a good way to find out that maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe this isn't right.
Well, I'm a very value-based person. And what I mean by that is that I look for similar values in other people, or at least look for what they value. And if it's in line with mine, I'm more than happy to have conversations. I'm more than happy. And I think that's why you and I get on very well because we both have integrity as probably our foundational central value that all our other values come from. But I look for that in other people and I do that at interviews as well. But I also recommend my clients do that when they're going for their interview. The very first thing I say is, what is the values of the organization you're going to? And do they align with yours? Do you know that there's nearly half of them that it doesn't? And it's because they have to take this role. They have to go for this interview. They need the money. They need the job. But what tends to happen is they then become very disgruntled. Whether it be 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, they become disgruntled because the value systems aren't aligned. So they are not happy going to work. They are not happy giving the extra half hour. They're not happy working over lunch. They're not even happy doing their own job a lot of the time because their value systems don't align. So it's one of the very first exercises I do with my clients is, let's get our values, let's see what their values are, and let's see if they align, and if so, how. Because once you understand that, you're able to communicate that during the interview, which is a massive part of every interview. We had talked about attitude, but in essence, what we're talking about is, where does that attitude come from? It comes from our value system. Then that's transferred into our actions and our behaviors. And then that's how we communicate as well. It all starts deep down somewhere we don't really sometimes like to go. And that's what we do here at Interview Skills Coach. We get past that surface level conversation and get to the root causes and understand people at a value level and then start working from there. Some people you can get to it in 20 minutes, some people it takes 2 hours, but we always get to it. And what I have found, Martin, is quite a few times actually, is that people have decided not to go for that interview that they were going to go for. They have decided and just thought, you're right, Kevin, the value systems don't align. I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting my energy, I'm actually wasting money also. Let's look at a role that will fulfill me, that I can stay at for the next 20 years if I want to. But I want to work for a company who wants to work with me. And that's lovely. Once you find that value system, that's absolutely lovely. Martin, I want to get to the question that everybody here is waiting for. And it's about your worst interview ever. That's why we're here, is to hear this. Now, I purposely never listen to anybody's worst interview ever because I like to be surprised, shocked, or appalled by this. And some of them, Martin, have been appalling. Some of them have been appalling. I have had a girl on recently who wasn't even acknowledged in the room when she spoke. The guy was sexist and ageist and racist.
Oh dear.
So the huge big bad triad of don't do's during an interview.
Hmm.
So, Martin, over to you. Tell us all about your worst interview ever.
Unfortunately, it's not going to be as extraordinary as that. I've been fortunate in life. I actually haven't had that many interviews. I haven't. I was so young then when I became self-employed. That's the interview stop. Although every new client is an interview, I suppose, and you could maybe look at have you had any bad client interviews, but I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to one of my very last interviews for a job I actually got. Um, and this is before you get to being self-employed. My experience from having 300 clients, and I've worked with thousands of clients over the 30 odd, 35 odd years of my career, is that the main reason that people go into self-employment isn't money, isn't prestige, although these things are important, isn't self-control. It's freedom. The
Mm.
freedom to be the masters of their own destiny. And they will actually work for less than the minimum wage and pay their staff more than the minimum wage in order to have the privilege of that freedom. It's not uncommon for that to happen in the earlier age of business. So I was starting to get that inkling that employment wasn't for me. And I was moving on from a job. When you're in employment, you climb the ladder. You need to get a better and better salary. Sometimes that you're working in a firm that can't offer you that, and therefore you interview and you move up a level by changing employers. And back at that time, my specialism was accountancy in legal practices. It's a very specific niche. A legal bookkeeper, a legal accountant. There's not really a course you can go on to do that, but there's very specific laws and regulations and statutes and around the way that legal accounting is done, unique to every other business. And really, the only way to get that experience to do that is to work with another legal bookkeeper accountant. Okay, so I had that experience. My skill set was incredibly valuable. I knew that, and I was maximizing. I was climbing the ladder by moving in between firms, and you have to be reasonable. You can't move after 6 months for a pay rise, so you have to be selective then about the firms that you move on to. And I was offered an interview, and I used to love interviews. I was never I was never nervous about going to interviews. I always looked forward to them because I always looked forward to the opportunity to show why I was the best candidate. Because I
Mm.
believed if I was going for a job, I was the best candidate. I genuinely believed that. And all I wanted was the opportunity to explain why that was and why I could really fit into the role. Because if I was applying for it, I believed it to be the case. So anyway, I turned up for one of these roles where I believed I was the best candidate, where I knew it would be, an increase in salary, an increase in responsibility. As a matter of fact, it was practice manager in a substantively sized legal firm in Belfast City Centre. Lovely big fancy plate glass windows, one of those tables with the leather inlaid, big chair.
Mm.
I would have had an assistant, a parking space in town, medical um, benefits, good pension. It was going to be an A class role, and I was perfectly cut out for this role. So I put on my shirt and my tie, and I brushed my hair and cleaned my teeth. I was early, made sure I was early. I'd researched the firm. I knew them inside. I knew them anyway because I've been working in this environment for a number of years. I knew the partners. I knew the current practice manager, why they were moving on. I knew some of the staff. I knew the systems that they use within the practices, and then I knew how to operate them. I knew the type of cases that I had this thing, and I was ready to go. I was getting this job. They weren't going to select anybody else. And I went in, went to reception, introduced myself. Oh yes, Mr. Gilchrist. There was no one else there. They hadn't got well, if they had got other candidates, they weren't there that day. Obviously, they weren't been lined up
Mm.
in the day. There probably were other candidates, but they weren't there that day. So, can you please take us, sir? Would you like a coffee, Mr. Gilchrist? Mr. Gilchrist, oh yeah, thank you very much. I will. I quite like to call Mr. Gilchrist. I must be important. All bigged up, sat down in this lovely leather sofa, plate glass windows, looking over Belfast, drinking my coffee, finished my coffee, set my coffee down, sat for a wee while, looked out the window, needed to go to the bathroom, went to the bathroom, came back, sat down again. Would you like another coffee, Mr. Gilchrist? No, no. Is there any word of, the interview's here, supposed to be here 15 minutes ago? I'm just wondering, oh, the partner isn't here at the moment during court. That was fine. The people get held up in court.
Mm-hmm.
2 hours later, 2 hours later, the partner rushed in and apologized. I fully appreciate he apologized. Martin, can you please come through? I'm really sorry. We were held up in court, blah, 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 blah. Went into the interview room, sat down. But by this stage, I was needled. I should have had left an hour before. I should have left, but I kept giving them 5 more minutes and 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. And by the time I went into that room, that's disrespectful. That's selfish. I appreciate why did somebody not just call from the court to say, look, apologize to Mr. Gilchrist or Martin, let him know that we're going to be late. Give me an explanation why, and it would have been okay. But nobody explained anything. Nobody gave any consideration of why that I'd taken time out of a day or that I might have had somewhere else to be or any of that. Went into the interview room and I was just thinking, actually, I don't want this job. But I'm here
Mm.
anyway. And the badness, and I shouldn't be saying this on a live broadcast just in case the guy actually sees it. We're talking more than 20 years ago. I'm not sure the guy's still in practice. But anyway, I went in and I just went, I'm going to just needle this guy. I'm going to make this. I'm not going to be rude, but I'm just going to see how far we can play it. And Martin, I've looked through your CV here. Why do you think you want this job? And I went, well, do you know what? Actually, uh, I want to be able to manage my own time because I believe it's important to be timely when you're dealing with the affairs of an important practice like this here. And timeliness is next to godliness. Would you not agree? The guy sat back and saw, is this guy being cheeky?
Yes.
And on it went. So he brought it. You asked the next question I would give. It wasn't a rude answer, but it was just a little bit of a needling answer in respect to the fact that you have to show respect as they come through the door. What do you think of? How do you feel you work with him? Well, I think I am very respectful of my team. And certainly you have the time that the team puts into turning up on, and I expect people to be on time, but at the same time, I will give them the time. And I just went on. I can remember sitting, the sun was starting to set behind this hill. I was thinking, that's my career. It's
So,
so
Martin,
anyway,
there sounds like a lesson in here somewhere.
yeah, there was a lesson. Don't be so cheeky because they ended up giving me the job. Because
No, they give you
regardless,
the job.
yeah, I got the job. And I was in it for about 6 months before I went and started my first business. And to be honest, I quite enjoyed the firm. I liked the people that worked in it. I really liked the job and I was really good at the job and stuff. But I had just reached a point in my own career where I knew that I needed to work by myself. And I was never going to be at the beck and call of someone that felt that they had something more important to be doing. There's a difference between clients. Clients always have something more important to be doing. They have their businesses to look after. But I don't have to sit for 2 hours waiting on them, doing
Yes.
their important business. We have a way that we can work with our very busy clients, that they're satisfied with what we're doing with them. We're satisfied with the way we're working with them too. But I just felt that I was trapped in that room and I felt very uncomfortable. And it was one of those things that made me realize I'm not really an employee anymore. I'm not that type of person anymore. I need to be out plowing my own plow. So it wasn't a disaster of an interview, yeah, in many ways, but in hindsight, all those things that I talked about that I would expect from a candidate,
Hmm.
that's not what I did when I sat in that room. That's not what I did because I allowed my own frustration and whatever that was, that those feelings of disappointment and the fact that I felt the guy had been selfish by showing complete disregard for who I was. even though
But what a lesson, Martin, you'd learned, because it has made you the person you are today. And I know you well, and what you have said there with regards to that disrespect and that timeliness and the poor timeliness,
Mhm.
that's not you. So you've taken that as a really positive lesson and you've put that into your own life. And for me as well, I tend to find that I learn quite a lot from those people who don't do well or don't do right. And I do learn more lessons in that way. The, the timeliness is close to godliness is what I love. You and I must be cut from the same cloth. I'm a great believer in time is the only thing, time and what you say is the only two things that you can never get back if you give away.
Mhm.
So your word, if you give that away, you can never get it back, which is where the integrity and the integral part comes in. And time, you can give it away, but you can never get it back. So Martin, just to summarize, because this has been an absolutely fantastic interview with you today. There's been so much you've given. The audience and listeners will have taken so much away from this, and especially around the interview process and what you should and shouldn't do. Although I mightn't take your advice on your last interview that you went for and you actually got. So maybe we'll scrub that one completely from this interview. Although when I sit back and I look at that as a whole, it's maybe because you were so relaxed and so direct is maybe why they picked you.
I think that was part of it. Well, first of all, I met the level, so that I could do the job.
Yes.
I think the thing that also meant was, although I was disappointed, angry, whatever it was a bit of tongue in cheek, and I think the guy was mature enough, adult enough. He could sort of see where I was coming from. You know, he wasn't a bad fella actually. This particular partner, it wasn't that he was a bad fella. It's just he was overworked, I suppose, in many ways. And I suppose the third thing was that I showed that I had a bit of gumption in the interview. You know, I wasn't just a yes man. I was the sort of
Hmm.
person that when I felt something wasn't right, I would make that evident. And that's important in business as well. Like an employee should, if they see something wrong, speak truth to power, as it were. You know,
But
otherwise,
that's that integrity piece again, Martin. You notice how this keeps coming back to that same word. And
yes,
it's that you are that person. You
thank you.
you live those that value every day.
Mhm. That's quite a
And
compliment.
for well, you know, for those that know you, Martin, know that to be the truth. And I've known you, and I've had the privilege of knowing you for a period of time now, and I've got to know that you're very similar to myself with those values and what you hold dear, family, and your word and time.
Mhm.
So you start to understand when you get to our experience in life that what is actually important.
That's true. That is
What
true.
is actually important. But Martin, I want to summarize some of the points that you made just back for our listeners so they can have a little takeaway for themselves.
Mhm.
And what I did like what you said was about not just having a one-track mind with regards to the accountancy, having a few more strings to the bow, and they don't necessarily need to be anything to do with accountancy. But what
Absolutely.
you have a real flavor or favor for is the idea of the hard work and the consistency and the actual doing of learning an instrument. But that could be something completely different as well. That could be like you rebuilt a car from scratch. That could be that you are a weightlifter, you know, or and you said champion because it takes hard work, consistency, and doing to get to that level.
Hmm.
And you mentioned champion a couple of times within a sporting context,
Yep.
but you need those three: hard work, consistency, and actually do the thing to get
Yeah.
to that level.
Hmm.
Good manners and courtesy goes a long way. And I know that some people might sit here and listen to us and think, ah, two old fuddy duddies. But I can tell you now, Martin, I have seen it in so many different places. It goes a long way, a very long way. A please, a thank you, a consideration of not coming in and planting your backside on the seat without being offered the seat. There's all of these very simple nuances that make a huge difference to the overall experience for everyone in that room. And I
Hmm.
have had experiences where people have come in, planted their backside on the seat, and turned sideways, Martin, away from me. Okay. Now,
Oh
think
dear.
of that. Think of what you want for that, but that is not the appropriate professional manner to come in, sit and address someone that you're asking or considering to work with them for. And the last one is show interest in the role you're applying for. And I really like that, because there's always that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I would always say, well, where I see myself when I'm in this position is doing this role really well, until such stage as I can do no more in this role. And then after that, I would like to move on to that next stage or level. And it's the way you answer that question can make the difference. Because you're right, I have seen so many people coming in for this job, but actually wanting this other job and using this as a stepping stone to get to there. And Martin, I don't mind that. But I want you to come in and do the job well that I'm hiring you for. Because that's what I need at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know an interview is a two-way conversation, and I know business is two ways. However, if I need something for that, if I need that square peg for that square hole, that's what I need to make the system and the cogs move. Then that's what I need. So I loved you said that, because lots of people will always say, no, talk about the future, talk about your aspirations and where you're going and what you're wanting to do. But you're right. Come in and say, I'm going to do this job really well first. And then we'll see where we go. And yes, you can have goals. You can have aspirations. Absolutely. And you should. Because that for me would be a red flag if you didn't. Because it means you're not organized in your mind, in your life, in your world. And if you're not organized in your life, mind, and world, you're not going to be organized in your job either. You're not. So Martin, this has been fantastic. Where can our listeners find you if they want to know more information?
Well, the scary thing is I'm easy found. I'm easy found. I almost wish this was going out live, because I'm going to a pub. Obviously, this won't be going out on the day that we're recording, but I'm going to be down in the Duke of York on Friday evening at 7 p.m. And whoever wants to come down is more welcome to join me. But it'll have gone by the time this is broadcast. But anyway, moving swiftly on. LinkedIn, just type Martin Gilchrist into LinkedIn. I've been there a long time, and there's lots of stuff on there. Facebook, type Martin Gilchrist into Facebook, or Gilchrist and Co into Facebook. Or go to Google and type Gilchrist and Co Chartered Accountants. There's not that many of us. And
that's Gilchrist, Gilchrist.
That's it. Gilchrist, as in Jesus, and co.com.
Perfect. Martin, thank you very much. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you on today. I would highly recommend anybody who's looking for a chartered accountant, to go speak with Martin and his lovely wife, Michelle. And for the next time, please look out for our next episode. We will be delving into more interesting conversations with more business owners, more people within HR, and potentially giving us a few little peeks behind the curtain to make your role and job much easier when going for an interview. All the very best.
For more details about our guest, or if you would like to be a guest, go to www.interviewskillscoach.co.uk/myworstinterviewever, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, on the other side of a successful interview is the life you deserve.